Hello. You are listening to the Carroll Connection with your host, Jared Carroll.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Carroll Connection. I am your host, Jared Carroll, here to bring you guys another great episode. I want to take a chance to shout out last week's episode 119, titled Birthday Reflection Year 27. On that episode, kind of celebrated my birthday, talked a little bit about what I've been going through this past year, some of the growth, talking about patience, being more patient with my life, and I also recapped my Ireland trip, which was a fucking fantastic trip. So if you guys are interested in hearing about my growth or even just the Ireland trip, go check that episode out at thecarrollconnection.simplecast.com. Also available Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. If you like to watch your podcast, you can go check it out on YouTube, search the Carroll Connection or Jared Carroll, and it should pop up right away for you. Also, a caveat, if you want to be a guest, returning or new, please hit me up on Instagram, Jared M. Carroll, or the podcast at Carroll Connection. You can text me too if you have my number or social media, whatever you want. Always looking for new guests. Got to remember to add this part to the podcast because I keep forgetting to, but this going into 2023, I'm going to remember to do this. But for today, episode 120, bringing back a guest from episode 73, Claudia Valenzuela.
Hey, Jared.
Welcome back. Welcome back.
It's nice to be back because it's been almost, I would say, a year.
Yeah, it's a little over a year. Yeah, because I think
I just got a memory actually that I posted the reel that you made.
Really?
And I was like, that's so weird timing.
Yeah, because we did have it scheduled a few weeks ago, and then COVID happened in your family, so we were like, all right, we'll just postpone it, and then we postponed it until after my Ireland trip. I actually got COVID out in Ireland, which is interesting. You can hear that on the episode from last week. I talked a little bit about that. But how about you catch everybody up on what you've been kind of up to since that last podcast?
All right. So definitely working a lot. We're definitely going to segue into that. Working a lot, especially with COVID, the new boosters coming out, flu vaccines, always like terrible season in the pharmacy because now I'm doing like double the amount of vaccines. So definitely working a lot, staying consistent with the gym. Definitely switched up my training a little bit. So I'm doing more high volume and kind of straying away from powerlifting. Because I know the last time we talked, we did a lot of talking about like powerlifting.
Mm-hmm. I remember that.
So a lot of that, then we were just catching up earlier how I'm in a relationship now. So definitely kind of trying to balance work life, personal life, still gym life. I guess that's considered personal life. But just kind of juggling everything right now.
Yeah, we could dive into each one of those. I would even love to talk about like relationship stuff on like more, we could talk on like a general, we don't have to talk about your relationship, but like talk in general about, especially the way dating is these days. It's fucking chaotic. We had some conversations.
I think we could spend like 3 hours on that.
I've always thought maybe I'd be more successful with this podcast if I made it a dating podcast, but I don't think I'd be great giving out dating advice based on my experiences. But in terms of just like your job, obviously it's been really hectic since the last like couple of years with COVID and stuff like that. How has things kind of been changing as we start to move a little bit past this like paranoia around COVID? Obviously there's still some of that still here, but like how has that been in your industry?
To be honest, I would say I think even in every industry, customer service or if you work with the public is so tough now. And I've worked with customer service since I was 16. And I would probably say the last year to a year and a half has been like the hardest, just emotionally. A lot of people are impatient and they want things right away. So I feel like a lot of things are just changing in that aspect where people just want things done right away. A lot of obviously short staffing is everywhere. It's not even just in my field, but everywhere. And I feel like that's kind of changed the culture of you working with customer service. Those days, like a 12-hour day now feels like 3 days in one.
I think with COVID too, and we talked about this with just like my work stuff too, as well as like the culture has been changed completely. And there's this sense that people want to get back to normal.
Yeah. And there's no normal.
Yeah. The normal that once was is no longer. And I think people are having a hard time adjusting to that. The way things are done is definitely different because people have to take more precautions. Safety is a little bit more involved. The knowledge is there too, because with a lot of the stuff that was taught to us or shown to us through the media and social media and doctors and all that nonsense about the stuff with early COVID stuff too, is not the same of what we know now too, which is like so interesting to see how the way people react to this stuff is different. Like when I was sick in Ireland, like I was just like, I'm just sick. Like it's just kind of like, it is
Feels
what
like
it
a
is.
sinus infection.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this shit kicked my ass a little bit. I ain't gonna lie. But like, it made me respect it. I'll say that. But it wasn't something that like, I was like, oh no, I got COVID. Like I gotta like hide and disappear. It was just like, no, just wore my mask, kind of tried to stay out of
precautions.
Yeah, just took the precautions, tried to like not like be as close to like my family when I was out there. Obviously it's kind of hard on a vacation. But we did what we could, and not everyone got sick, which was a positive. So like there were things that some worked and some didn't. But like the way, and the impatience part too is like a crucial part to hit on because people really want things done now.
Yeah.
And
we're all burnt out. We're all tired, especially healthcare professionals. We've been doing this for like how many years? And I think last time when I was on here, I talked about how a lot of pharmacies were closing. So I was going to other locations just to keep it open. And then it kind of all caught up on me because to what expense did I do all those extra shifts or all those doubles to burn myself out basically at that point?
Yeah, I mean, what you do too is you're providing a lot to, especially a lot of like the elders in the community too, who need their medicine, who need stuff like that, and obviously everyone else too, but like more specifically those people who are usually more immune risk too. So like, there's a lot more pressure on people who do what you do, and like I could totally understand that too. And like even when we had that conversation, now it's kind of even coming back to just how you were bouncing around, going to different places. Do they still have you doing that as much since?
I've definitely tried to lessen that for myself. I still do help out occasionally because I'm a workaholic. That's just it's a battle that I try to face daily to not overwork myself because I need to know my limits, and obviously that comes with like self-care and doing things that I need to do in order to stay at the pace that I'm going. But most recently, I would say maybe like a couple months ago, I remember it was a really long day. It was a long day to a long week. And I just remember just a lot of bad like patients, one after the other, and just getting yelled at, all day when you're just tired and you're doing your best. And I remember going to the bathroom, and then I called my girlfriend, and I was like, I don't know if I can continue doing this anymore. I think that was like the first realization where I was like, I'm doing too much. And then I'm like, this is burnout because I love what I do at the end of the day, and I love helping people. So then to even hear me say that out loud to my girlfriend and just say, I don't know if I want to help people anymore because I'm not feeling fulfilled anymore.
That makes a lot of sense though. I mean, and for the listeners too, a lot of this conversation is going to be centered around self-care. It's the name of the episode. I forgot to even mention that, but like I knew it was going to be brought up organically because that's usually how these episodes when people are coming back, that's what I'm targeting. But I agree with that too, in the sense I've even felt that not even just within my own work, within the podcast as well, as like when you're doing something for so long and like you're giving up a lot of like, it's when you're doing your work, it's your job. Like you're giving up a lot of your time to do these things. Like obviously my situation is a little different than I'm giving up my free time to just do this podcast. But like when you're giving up so much of yourself for, in your instance too, something that's very demanding and that's very needed too in society, it burns you out. And like it definitely, I could see where it would drain a lot of like your physical and mental health too. And I'm wondering too with the gym, did that ever take like a back seat to like all the work that was coming in too within like the time probably since we've been on the podcast? How did that affect your gym life?
It's tough because it was hard to, like, the gym is always hard to manage just because I'm going in 4 or 5 times a week sometimes. So then to manage that with, work that I do, like sometimes I do 12-hour shifts. And that's considered like a normal shift in my field. I don't think I would say it ever took a backseat because I knew that I had to keep going to the gym just to keep going at the pace that I was going. Like even if I was running on empty, even if I didn't do like a huge workout or, I had to keep going because I think it was very similar to what my manager most recently asked me. She's like, how do you go to the gym after a 12-hour shift? Like, what's your motivation? And that's sometimes a tough thing to answer because I'm not always motivated to go after a 12-hour shift. Like imagine going, working 8 to 8, and then now you're going to the gym for like an hour to an hour and a half. But the way I compare it, at least for me, is it's for my mental health. That's like me not taking medication, for it. That's like asking someone, oh, like, how do you take medication every day? Because that to me is my medication. So I need it. So it's definitely tough. I don't think I would say it ever took a backseat, but I think there were some days where I had to maybe shorten my workout, or I didn't get the most of my workout, or I didn't meet the goals that that I had promised myself like week in and week out. So obviously you want to hit certain numbers, you deadlift too. Like sometimes I want to hit a certain deadlift number by like 2 months from now. And if I'm always going in tired, I'm not always going to make the progress that I want to see.
Yeah, I mean, I felt a lot of that too in what I've been doing in the gym as well. And I think it was with you, we had this conversation in that last episode of like, just going sometimes is like even better than just like, even if you go and like not hit everything you want to do in that gym session, it's still important for the consistency aspect to form that habit still. And it's always harder around this time of the year too. And and I've been feeling that because like, obviously I went on my vacation, like I hiked the mountains, so I was able to get some type of activity in there. Like it definitely bothered me that I wasn't able to like work out, but then I come back, I get a tattoo, can't really work out with my tattoo. It's starting to heal so I can start working out again. But like, and then you throw the holidays in there. It's just like, there's a lot of chaos that it is happening around this time of the year. And like, there's a lot of stress too, because obviously it's like people talk about flu season and stuff like that. That's coming in. Like you're seeing more people as the holidays come, and it's just like, it's very, very draining. And it's hard to continually keep going to the gym. And something I've kind of tried to like remind myself is like, I don't have to be like a fitness person. I don't have to be like someone that promotes it all the time. Like I don't have to be on that shit 24/7. Like it's okay to fall off a little bit. It's okay to take some time for yourself. Like you don't need to be working out all the time. Like it's okay to have this like period where it's like, I'm not working out as much as I would like to, but like I'm still trying to be active. And it's like, I mean, as soon as I could like probably starting next week back on like my regular work schedule and stuff like that. And now that tattoo's healed, I'm going to be working out again. And it's like, it is like riding a bike where you have to continually keep riding it to keep doing it. And sometimes you get off the bike, you don't ride it for a little bit, but like you don't forget how to ride that bike.
Yeah, definitely not.
And I think that's important for a lot of people because going to the gym is hard. Going to the gym consistently is even harder. So like for people who struggle to go to the gym, what kind of advice would you give them to continue to like keep going to the gym? 'Cause as someone who works as much as you do, I think you could give really great insight into something like this.
I think you also, with that, you have to be realistic. So, there's a lot of people that say, oh, I can get up at 4 or 5 in the morning to do a workout. I am never going to be one of those people. I am not a morning person. That's just not where I'm most productive or most going to be able to get a good workout in. So for me, it's at night. So that's not going to work for everyone though. So you kind of have to just be realistic with yourself, because if you're making goals to go up to the gym every morning before work and you're not a morning person, you're most likely not going to be consistent with it. Versus if I'm going at night, I'm always going to be consistent with it. So I think little ways like that, but then motivation wise, that's tough because you really have to find your why. And why you're going. If you're going for reasons that you're not super passionate about, then you're most likely not going to stay consistent with it. Because for me, going in that's me giving myself my me time too. Because that's really the only time where like I work out at night, I can have peace and quiet. I just do a workout and it kind of silences a lot of thoughts. Like, obviously I work in a high paced environment. So my head's jumping up and down like everything on the to-do list throughout that entire day. So my mind doesn't stop. So I can go to bed, and if I didn't work out, I could probably just keep thinking of things that I need to do the next day, or what I didn't do today, or if I could have done this right. But then when I go to the gym, that kind of just quiets everything a little bit. So I think the mixture of that is just finding your why and being realistic with yourself too. If you're not a morning person, you're not going to do a morning workout every day consistently. If you're not a night person, you're not going to do that either. So you kind of have to just find what works with you, what works with your schedule. And sometimes that takes some playing around. For me, I think I was still figuring things out the last time I was on your podcast, because I was switching gyms. I had never felt comfortable in a commercial gym. And then I found another gym where that fit my schedule to go after like a long shift. So it took a lot of back and forth, and it's not always going to be consistent right away, but you need to find that baseline that's going to be consistent for you.
100% agree with that. And seeing a lot of your posts always like remind me, like, I gotta get in the gym. I gotta lift. Because like, I think for me, like seeing the people who I support around me doing well and like actually continually doing what they do is always motivational, because I love when I see people who come on the podcast, talk about something that they do, and then continue to keep doing it after the podcast.
Yeah.
I think that says volumes about that person's character and work ethic. And when I see you continually keep doing that, it says a lot. And like, it motivates me to keep doing that, because it also holds me accountable in that back end where it's like, all right, like if I can have all these people come on and continually do what they do, there's no excuse for me to continue doing what I do.
Yeah.
So it's like a double thing where it's like, I can give people a platform and it holds them accountable, but it also holds me accountable too when I see them also succeeding in what they do. And I think that's like the positive of like having this platform. And like, as we're doing this, like I haven't recorded an interview style podcast probably like a month almost, coming up near it. And like, just like in my head, just thought about, I was like, this is why I do this. Like, got me right back into this. Like, at first I was like, I'm like a little nervous to like do this like again. Like, I feel like I haven't interviewed someone in a while, and like, it's like riding a bike, just came right back, and just, we talked for like damn near over an hour almost.
We
like,
for an hour.
like, and like,
it's been almost a year since we really seen each other.
Yeah. And be able to like actually sit down and have this conversation. And I think what's funny is like, I'm still trying to figure out what time works best for me to work out. Like, I've done morning workouts. I like them. I've done night workouts. I like them. And I've done like kind of like mid-afternoon workouts. And I like those too. Like, so it's like, I think the most productive, and I hate saying this, workouts that I've ever had are the mornings. Like, it's the hardest to get up and get motivated and do. But like, usually those are my best workouts. And like, I hate saying that openly on my podcast because like,
that's what I was going to ask you about it.
Yeah. Cause I'm kind of thinking about starting that up again. Like, part of me does not want to do it. Like, I don't want to wake up at 5 in the morning and work out, but especially with the stuff I told you about work, I might have to do it. But like,
once you create a routine, I feel like I'm such a creature of habit because I thrive on routine. I'm not super crazy about change depending on what it is, but once I have that routine, that's what I fall back on, because we're our habits. You know, when something goes wrong in our lives, we're going to go back to that habit. So what's the habit that you're creating? If you just do it consistently enough, that's going to be like your go-to. It's going to feel weird one morning when you don't work out, once you have like that routine going.
Yeah, no, you hit that on the head right there. It's like, the thing that I always would fall back on too is like those morning workouts too. When shit would go wrong in my life over the last like several years, when I needed to like correct the ship and right the wrongs, it's the morning workouts that I'd start back up with. Because like, if you start your day off with that, the rest of your day is a piece of fucking cake. Yeah. Like, you get the hardest part of your day over with and done with. And like, in the morning, there really isn't much distraction. Like, middle of the day, like, I could be on social media, I could be scrolling stuff. I'm thinking about left and right, thinking about what I got to do later. It's like, there's a lot going on. Even at night, I'm just tired. I'm exhausted. Like, it's always hard to like, yeah, I could take a scoop of pre-workout and like push through it and get a solid workout in. But when I wake up and like start, like, usually sometimes drink a coffee or whatever to do, like, using my pre-workout, I start lifting. It's like, I really would get after it. And like, the 2 times that I've like done that habit, I've had really good success with it. So it's like, I know the formula kind of works. And like, my like selfish side is like, dude, I really don't want to wake up for it. But it's like, I'm almost thinking about kind of making it like the habit around like this time of year. Cause like usually around like this, like, I guess spring, summer, I usually stop and usually start doing like afternoon and like night workouts. But during the winter, like, it's dark early and stuff like that. Sometimes it's just like, you're tired by like 9 o'clock at night and you want to go to bed, but like, it's already dark. I mean, like, who cares? And like, kind of works with that schedule. So that's something I'm thinking about, is like, as we're talking about stuff that's self-care related, that is something that is going to help me. And I know it's going to help me. It's going to make me feel better. But it's like, fuck, Like it's like, and I've been thinking about this for a while too, and like having this conversation is like forcing me to like say
perfectly.
it. Yeah, and it's like, damn, like, it's like because usually around this time of year is when I start falling off the wagon, working out wise, and like I get a little bit lazier, and the goals aren't getting hit as much. The holidays, like I start going hiking a lot more. I got tattoos just around this time of year because the summer's not a great time for that. It's just like I start falling off and start looking in the mirror. I'm like, come on, dude. Like, but it's like I think it goes back to what I was saying was though, it's like it's okay to fall off that wagon.
You just get right back on.
Yeah, as long as you know what you have to do in order to achieve what you want. And I've kind of accepted too of like I like about where I've kept my body in the last like year and a half. If I can get to that place again, it's like great. And then it's okay to like, it kind of is like, it's like a motivating thing. Like I regress a little bit, get motivated again, work out again, get back to where I am, regress. It's like this constant cycle with working out. And it's kind of like this like love-hate relationship that I'm developing with it. It's like usually around the summer times where you take your foot off the gas a little bit for myself. And then the winter is like, I've always said it, like people are like, oh, I hate the winter and like the seasonal depression. It's like, I use this time as like the go time, like, cause like there's really not much going on. So it's like, this is the best opportunity for you to work on you. And I like to like look at that, like this time period as kind of like that time for myself. And especially more just like being in like the Northeast and stuff, like just like, what are you going to do? Just go make snow angels all the time? Like, I mean.
Well, you also have to know your limits too, because that ties in with burnout and self-care, because maybe you do have to listen to your body sometimes. There have been some weeks where I do have to kind of cool it on, obviously not everybody has that problem where like they have to cool it on the training, because sometimes I want to go too full throttle on things. So sometimes I kind of just have to listen to my body and kind of know my limits, whether it's with work or at the gym, because we need rest too, as much as we want to promote like the grind culture, which I hate that we promote it so much. But we need rest. We're not robots, we're humans, we need rest too.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. And like that topic too of just the grind, switch the camera. With the grind, I've always kind of like I've fallen into that trap too of just like grind it out, do it. And I think we've even talked a little bit about this before in that other podcast too about taking time for yourself. And like I know we've talked about this too, just like back and forth on social media and stuff and sharing stuff, that it is so important to take that time to kind of like unplug from stuff. And recently I've kind of like done it kind of naturally. I've kind of been more waiting for stuff like this, like going on a vacation for like 2 weeks, forced me to really just unplug. Like I didn't make TikToks. I didn't do any podcasts. Like it's been hard to hop back on that horse.
Yeah.
But like it definitely made me look at things a little bit differently and like, okay, how can I get better at this? What can I do differently to make this more fun? And like changing how I do things, changing equipment. I've talked to you about some of the stuff that I'm working to plan on doing going into this next year, and like how to constantly get better at what I do. And I think that's important for a lot of people is to like take that second or however long you need to like unplug, pull back, figure out, look at the landscape, and then continue doing what you're going to do. And like that should be like the caveat for like the grind culture. It's like, yeah, it's important to grind. And like I've gotten more into that space of like, at the end of the day, you just have to do it. Like no one's going to do it for you, but you're human. You got to respect your mental health and you got to know yourself enough to pull back. And I don't think enough people do that. I think so many people just continually just like go. And then they burn out and they don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
And like you see it all the time on social media when people get into different endeavors, what they want to do. And I've even seen it people coming on the podcast. Like they use this as kind of like a momentum thing. And then it starts to drain back. And it's like sad to see, but it's like I understand that aspect of human nature is that's going to happen to people when they use that as like their motivating factor. Curious to know why too, with like you kind of pulled back from powerlifting too, because I know that was a lot of what we talked about last time.
Yeah.
Like maybe talk about a little bit why, and then maybe the benefits of what you do now versus what you maybe have learned through powerlifting. So I found that interesting too, that you've kind of switched your training styles.
Yeah. I mean, I still, obviously, I'm always going to squat, bench, deadlift.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
obviously in a different kind of way now versus just trying to lift super heavy. I think the main reason why I kind of strayed away from that, right after I went on your podcast, I was training with a new coach. And we actually were training for a powerlifting competition. I forgot, it was sometime in the summer. I think it was supposed to be this past June. And I actually ended up last minute not doing it. And I think the biggest reason was because I don't think I was as passionate about it as when I did it the first time. Because when I did it the first time, it was like a healing process to kind of get into and kind of be in that headspace where I'm trying something new. And it's not that I didn't like it. I loved it. I loved when I did my first powerlifting competition. But I think the biggest thing was it was so much strain on my body, and then it started to go from fun and nice and into like a lot of pressure to hit these numbers. And I just felt like there was a lot of pressure to always perform in a certain way, I guess, or to hit these numbers because it's like, oh, I'm tiny, but I'm hitting all these big numbers. And then I wasn't doing it for me anymore. And I was doing it just for other people. And then I think I was so close to doing it because my coach, we had trained so hard together. And then I just remember, talking to him, and I said, how would you feel if I chose not to do this? And he said he would support me either way. So I think that was like the final straw where I was like, at this point, I'm not doing it for myself. I'm doing it to make my coach proud, and he's going to be proud of me no matter what. So I think at that time, I just had so much things going on in my life where it wasn't fun anymore. So why would I do something that I'm not passionate about?
No, that makes a lot of sense to me. And like, to use it kind of like, it makes a lot of sense. It also probably introduced you into like a certain style of training too that you probably never had experienced too, like to train that way. And like, you could take things from it and use it in your training now too, which is probably very beneficial for you. Because I find that too is like, sometimes you have to just do things in the moment that are going to help you in the moment.
Yeah.
But in the long term, it's not something you want to continually keep doing.
Mm.
And I can relate to that because I think that this podcast will eventually change and grow and adapt. And I think it's meant to. And I think part of me has been like reluctant to, because like it holds on to a piece of me that was like broken and unhealed when I was doing
you're
it.
Healing from it, yeah.
And that this podcast was like everything to me at that moment is like, and now I'm like, I've accomplished a lot since then. I've hit over like 10,000 listens. I've hit over 100 episodes, and like I've brought so many people back now. And it's like, I need to do something with this to like really move it forward into like the person who I am now too. And I think I'm kind of in that stage right now where I'm trying to put those pieces together. I think we talked about that too. Is like, I have these puzzle pieces and I just got to figure out how to fit them together.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because like I'm doing it while doing a podcast. I'm doing the podcast while trying to figure out the podcast. Like it's like an interesting process. And I think it's kind of cool to look back. I even said it last week on my solo was like, I look forward to looking back on these episodes to see where I was at that point in life. And I think that's what motivates me to keep doing it. When I look at like the tattoo on my arm from like my grandfather and stuff like that, and like people who have been a part of this podcast and part of this process, it's like, I don't just owe it to myself. I owe it to those people to keep doing this. And like being someone that could ignite conversations, not only just about mental health, but about life in general, to make jokes, to have laughs, to catch up. And I think that's super important. And like, as we're even doing this, like it's reminding me why I do this. And I think that's always important is like, when you're figuring out what you like doing in life, when you've had that feeling, that's when you know you're doing something you actually like doing. And it's like, I wish more people could feel that in today's society. But like you said, we live in this burnout culture where people are so just like
going through the motions, just getting through the days, the long days.
And they're just high strung, they're stressed. It's like it goes back to what we talked about, is people trying to get back to normal, but like there is no normal. Like this is the normal. Like we have to figure out what we have in front of us and continue to move forward, not backwards. And like in terms of just like work culture too, like I could totally see that. It's like, I was talking a lot about this off the podcast of just like the way that this corporate structure of like the way a lot of companies run. It's so on about like micromanaging on your ass. Like it's just not healthy for people. Like as someone who's worked in this type of field for a long time, it's just so frustrating to see that even with all the changes that have happened since COVID, that these companies want to go back to what things were. And it's like it's just sad because like people want to be with their family and their friends and they want more time for themselves. Obviously everyone wants more money. Like that's just like a normal thing. But like just getting your time and money your time and spending with that with family and stuff like that. And like for me, I noticed it helps my mental health to get that to have to try to give that back to these companies for nothing in return. It's just sad for when I see and I see it a lot on TikTok too, where people are being forced back into the offices and things like that. And no one wants to go back. And it's just like
I can't really relate to that too.
I know. In your industry, it's like a completely different
I'm
thing.
Like, yeah.
But like, and like I just see it on social media. Just it's more about these corporate companies, and like I think we talked a little bit about this on the last podcast too, of like how you've kind of transitioned. I want to dive into a little bit about that. It's like how are you still doing what you're doing? Are you happy with what you're doing versus the corporate stuff? Like, do you still maybe have friends that are still doing that path? Like, kind of like catch up a little bit on that.
It's tough because I think for me, so that's just built in my schedule. I'm never going to be able to get rid of like the 12-hour days. But I think more of being able to know my limits and know my burnout and know what I need to do. It's always going to be up and down. It's always going to be an up and down battle, and nothing's going to be perfect because I will fall into burning myself out, and then I realize once I have like a realization, like I said earlier. But I think the biggest thing is just knowing limits too, because it's not just work. Sometimes we get burnout from. Sometimes, like I had 2 weddings that I was a part of recently, and I just felt like, yeah, I made it to all these events and I kind of managed my time, but it's like at what cost? Like what version are you getting of me if I'm too tired because I haven't given myself the time that I need for myself? So I think it's the combination of both, like not doing too much at work where it's, picking up extra shifts or not having a day off to myself. And then also how am I spending that time off to myself? Because I did feel like I was kind of disappointing a lot of people by not making it to their birthday party or not making it here. I think I missed one of my really close friends' 30th birthday party this past couple of months. And I just remember feeling so bad. I felt like I was like letting people down in my life because I'm always like, go, go, go. Like I'm here, I'm at the gym, I'm doing this, I'm going to this event, I'm going there. But then I kind of have to take a step back and am I really enjoying the moment by me going to this event and I'm not myself? I'm drained, I'm going on low battery. So I think it's the combination of things and knowing that if I don't give myself that time, the people around me just need to understand that I may be able to make it, but what version are you getting out of me, at that point?
I love how you said that too. Like, what version are you getting of myself? And like, I think that is like the important, like nail on the head, slammed it home, slam dunk on that one is like, at what cost of doing all these things is it going to affect me? And then what is that output going to be on the rest of the world? And like, I felt that too with this podcast. Is kind of like putting that pressure on myself to continue doing an episode every single week, to keep going, to like see my friends doing their podcast, see them keep going with it. And it's like, you definitely have to like know yourself, and it takes time, it takes patience, it takes growth and maturity to be able to recognize. And we had a joke about this of just like being kind of like introverts and knowing when to like unplug our social battery and like the Irish goodbyes at party, and knowing just like, oh, if I go home at this time, I still can go watch my show. And like having that time for yourself is self-care.
And not like, feeling selfish for it.
Yeah. Like, and that's something that it's like hard to like let go, is like the letting down people feeling. But once you let that go, I feel no guilt leaving stuff. Like, it's like, all right, peace out. Like, it's like knowing when to say no and when you've had enough. I think that is such an important like aspect of self-care, that once you learn how to do that, you become your advocate. You become your biggest advocate. And I even talked about that, like the quote that I picked on Friday, yesterday. You guys will hear this on Monday. Well, on Friday from my birthday episode, it's like, you have to be your biggest advocate. And if you're not, you're probably going to fail at whatever you do. It's like, and I even talked about this on episode 118 with Zane on an episode called "The Wake Up." It was like he was talking about creating his music and like how people don't support. And like I've had so many people who've come on the podcast and whatever endeavor that they choose to go to is like it's crazy that people that you think are going to support you just don't do it at first. And it goes to the aspect of like they're not going to because people have their own lives, one. And two, it's like they're not going to show any respect until you show up for yourself and you do it. You have to do the damn thing and like create whatever you're going to create. And then people are going to be like, oh, I like that. That's dope. Like, it's cool. But like in that beginning process, when you're figuring the stuff out, it's lonely. It's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. But like, that's part of the creation process of whatever you're trying to pursue. And it falls perfectly into the self-care aspect because when you're creating these things, you're going to have all these like uncomfortable feelings where you have to learn how to figure them out and like take time for yourself too. Because if you don't, like you said, you're going to be giving this version of yourself that's really not palatable by a lot of people. And it's not going to be even what you want to be giving to other people. Because you could be messing up opportunities for yourself by like showing up like half of yourself to like whether it could be a work event or something related to, I don't know, if you're someone like me where you're in the dating field, you show up half-assed to a date, like you mess up a date with someone who could be a really good person,
exactly.
like, or like mention about your friend, like not going to events, or like if you went to the event, just being a downer because you don't want to be there. It's like there's so many things where you could mess up relationships, friendships, business opportunities if you're not taking care of your mental health. And I think that's like a perfect like topic. And I was glad that when you reached out and we were setting up this episode that you really wanted to talk about self-care. Because this issue, this topic is talked about a lot in social media, but like talking about these specific like instances like that we're talking about here and like these different events and these different like things are important for people to hear and realize because like they're everyday things. Like, and
it's also portrayed, I feel like, in such a beautiful way on social media where it's not always going to be like sunshine and rainbows. Like self-care looks so different in so many ways. Like sometimes I need my alone time. And I think that was a biggest thing too, kind of tying that in with like relationships. When I'm like, okay, now I have this training schedule that I have. Now I'm doing this, I'm working, but I'm also trying not to work too much to burn myself out. That way I can be more productive at work and show up better for like team and patients. But then now I have this relationship. And everyone told me that they were like, say goodbye to your training schedule once you get into a relationship. And that's probably one of the most toxic things to say to somebody because that's something that's important to me. So you're basically like normalizing the fact that you're going to give up things that are important to you because you're entering a relationship. But that also includes self-care because I need self-care in a relationship as well. And I need my partner to respect that. So juggling everything else, I feel like a lot of people told me that just to get used to like a different lifestyle once you have like a new partner or a new relationship. But it's not always going to be perfect. And it's self-care looks so different in so many ways. For me, self-care is taking myself out to lunch. Sometimes it's being alone. Sometimes it's watching. Sometimes I like sad movies. So sometimes that's like comforting to me.
I like sad music. I do the same thing. I have a whole music playlist just called Sad Boy Jer. Like I don't give a shit.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess that's, obviously that's not self-care for everybody, but that's self-care isn't going to look like what it looks like on social media. It's going to look so different than what other people want to portray. But even relationship wise, that was hard to kind of also keep up with self-care or kind of almost, I was in a routine, and when you're inviting somebody else into your life, you're kind of disrupting the routine, not always in a bad way, but you need to kind of have your boundaries at that point. And I think what I was telling you earlier, it happens when you least expect it, and I know not everybody wants to hear that. But my routine really wasn't, jumbled up that much from having the right person come along. Because we both value the same things, where it's training, giving ourselves self-care time, communication. And I know that's obviously, we talked earlier saying, I told him, ditch the dating apps and just focus on yourself, do what you love to do. And it just kind of happens. And, I hated when people used to tell me that all the time, but it really does just happen when you least expect it.
No, it's true. And I think what you hit the perfect word. If you weren't going to say it, I was going to say it, but it goes boundary. Like once you have boundaries and like you know yourself, that you're not going to sacrifice certain things. Obviously, in any relationship, you're going to have some
Yeah.
sacrifices.
Mhm.
That's you're going to have compromises and all that such. That's important. But for something like that, where like the gym is a crucial aspect to not only just like physical and mental health, but also emotional health, because those two tie together and flow into that. So if you're not having that space for you, and this is for anyone, if you're not working out or doing some type of physical activity, like you're hurting yourself in the long run. Like you should have that space for yourself to just kind of like, whether it's just going on a walk, whether you can have a treadmill, you could do a stationary bike. Like you don't have to do anything crazy. Just be doing something active, because that's what our bodies are meant to do. Like standing stationary or sitting stationary is an awful idea, because it's going to negatively impact your mental health and then your physical health by default. So I think that's always an important, crucial aspect. But like, if there's certain things that you like to do in like your single life, for a lot of people who are still single, like learn how to like incorporate that with like your relationships. Like at least set a boundary that, hey, maybe you like to watch football on Sundays or something like that. Maybe you should find a partner that probably likes
I relate.
football. It's just like
Yeah.
it's trying to find something that can compromise. Or if they don't like love football, just be able to compromise and like, I really want to watch this game.
Yeah.
Like it's just like pick and choose your battles, but like pick and choose your battles with someone who actually wants to pick and choose the battles with you. Like it's not like an actual war, but you're actually like compromising and coming together to form an actually healthy, like positive relationship with that person. Because I think so many people get attached through trauma, and
Yeah.
I'm a victim of that as myself. It's just like
Yeah.
getting into things that feel good in the moment, but as your own self, you're not completely healed, and you're allowing that relationship to dictate your own emotions as well, which negatively impact not only that relationship, but yourself and the people around you. So I think it's important, especially in today's dating culture, to kind of lay down boundaries for yourself. And I think honestly, boundaries are attractive. Like if someone says, I don't do this at this time, no
Yeah.
problem. Like, or I don't do this, or I don't date people that do this. I respect them more. Even if it doesn't work out with that person, the fact that they can communicate their boundary, that's something that they don't want to do, I'm all for that, because it also saves time too. We're not playing games. It's like, you don't like this and I don't like this. Maybe we're not a match in this. We can move on. But like at least communicating that and knowing those boundaries, I think, are super important. I think it goes into the self-care aspect, because the only way to learn those boundaries is to give yourself the time to understand those
Yeah.
boundaries. Because when you have emotions and you're reacting out of trauma, you're not going to see why you're acting out of trauma, but usually it's because you're crossing your own boundary.
Something similar to that, I feel like when I first started actually dating my partner, I remember I was having like a rough day at work, and I said something like, I've been struggling lately, to one of my coworkers, and she innocently, like not in any bad way, she was like, you have a girlfriend though, you should be happy. And I just kind of like took a moment, and I was like, how that's so toxic to think that one person has say on my entire happiness. And I think that's the same thing with like having boundaries, because my happiness, that's so much pressure on the other person too. Like I feel like that's not a healthy way to look at relationships, to, oh, because I have a girlfriend, that means I'm happy and my life's perfect. She adds to my happiness, don't get me wrong, I love her, and she's amazing, she's absolutely one of the best people I've ever met, but to put that kind of pressure on her to make my entire life happy, that's such a weird way to, I've never understood that. And that's like such in our dating culture too, where I want her to be happy separately and I want to add to her happiness, and I want to be happy separately and her add to my happiness.
I agree with that. And like, I think Will Smith said something like that, but like, I don't like their relationship, so I'm not going to quote him. That turned out,
Yeah.
not
No.
in the best way. So I can't really quote that, but like, it's an amazing point, because like, it is true. Like once you understand the things that you like to do and find actual happiness being by yourself, doing what you like to do, you got to find someone on that same wavelength. You don't have to necessarily have to have the same interests all the time, but have that understanding that you guys like maybe different things, and find that thing that you guys do like together. Because I think it's always important too to have that one or two things maybe that you guys can bond
Oh, yeah.
over. I think it's important, besides going to dinner or doing this or doing that. Like there should be some type of thing that you guys can come together and do, whether it's watching football maybe or something like that, or maybe going to the gym together, or I don't know, setting an hour to like sit on your porch and read books separately, just like being together in that in the energy. But like having that is always important. And this dating culture is just like all over the place, and I don't think social media is really helping that either.
Oh yeah, no, because I feel like even with we touched upon it earlier off the podcast, but I had mentioned to you as I was getting older. Obviously, I'm hitting 30 next March. I was coming to terms with the fact that I didn't want to date. I didn't want to like do put effort into something that obviously is portrayed so badly on social media and all these dating apps. And I was just so happy with myself that I thought for the longest time, I don't know if it was just me being convinced by social media, but obviously I deal with a lot of depression and anxiety. I'd probably say more depression over anxiety, but ever since I was younger. But I always was convinced that because I had depression, that I wasn't going to be a good partner, or I wasn't worthy of having that kind of love that you see all the time. And that's such a toxic way to look at it, but that's how I was convinced by society, where it's like, you're sad, so that means like you're going to be toxic to your next partner. And I feel like in the relationship that I'm in now, it's the first time I ever feel like I don't feel bad about my mental health. I don't feel bad about having a bad day or saying like, "Hey, I'm really depressed," or like I'm going into a funk and I need some help. And I think that was probably one of the biggest realizations where I just want to tell everybody, like, if you're convinced that you're not worthy of love, that's so far from the truth. I think everybody's worthy of love, especially if you're dealing with mental health issues. That doesn't make you unworthy of anything. My life on social media may seem like, I mean, obviously I try to be a little bit more vulnerable, but everyone's like, you have a girlfriend, you guys work out together, you're able to get on these workouts, you have a good job, and like my life's perfect. But that comes with a lot of other stuff behind the scenes, especially when me and my girlfriend started dating. You know, I told her sometimes I'm not always the best at communication, but I'm willing to work on that. So it's always being honest with your partner and also knowing yourself too. That was the beauty of that. That's why I tell you just focus on yourself, because that was the beauty of me knowing myself. I was able to create those boundaries because before I didn't even know what my boundaries were. I didn't know if that was okay with me, or if this hurts me and I need to be vocal about it. But it's all the social media that kind of convinces us that we just have to kind of be in this cookie cutter way in order to have a relationship, and that's not at all the case.
No, that's so true. And like I told you a lot about too about the stuff that I've gone through, not only on like last episode, but like more this episode, this off the episode.
Yeah.
But like that 2020 year was like, and like even into 2021 was just so chaotic for me emotionally. And I think COVID had an impact on that. So getting into social media had an impact on that. Like there was a lot of factors that played into that situation, a lot of unhealed trauma that unfortunately unraveled in that situationship. But like I learned so much about myself from that moment and going forward. And I even said it on my last episode was like 2022 was like one of the first times where I really just feel like I didn't have to like be on the run and defending my emotions, and like there wasn't a lot of chaos really going on, and like it felt good for once where like I was actually figuring out what I like and what I don't like, and dating around, seeing what I do and don't, and like learning those boundaries is important because then I could be like, well, I don't want to do that. I want to do this,
Or this hurts me, or this
exactly.
is okay, or,
And like once I figured that stuff out, this and it's but like you said, it's a process. It takes time to learn these things because you're not taught it. It's just something you have to learn through experience, unfortunately, because no one's gonna do it for you and then give you an experience. It's not how life works.
yeah.
I wish sometimes so like it would save me a few things, but like I think it's important though, and I think you're hitting the nail on the head with a lot of this stuff. And talking about dating is taking that step back and like giving yourself that respectable time to learn what a boundary is. I want to turn into one more topic before we start to wrap things up, and relating to just like social media and podcasting. You did do another podcast,
Yes.
and like I wanted to give you a chance to talk about that experience and what that was like, and hopefully doing this the first time helped going into that episode with the.
It helped a lot because I was so nervous. I thought I was nervous coming here the first time, but you and me, we had that, 1 hour face to face. The podcast that I did I actually mentioned him in my first podcast because I followed him when I first graduated and became a pharmacist. I think his handle is like the Fit Pharmacist.
Mhm.
So with him incorporating like training, and then just a lot on self care and avoiding burnout and fulfillment. that was huge for me just to even be able to meet that person, whether it was through Zoom. But it was interesting because it was a lot kind of like this, where it's just having a conversation and you kind of have to forget you're just being recorded, because then that's when I start to get nervous. But that was definitely very different, and it helped me get out of my comfort zone, because that first time when I came here, I was way out of my comfort zone. So I didn't even know you. It was Jess who kind of made the introduction to us, but I didn't even know you. And then I came here and we sat for like, I like the fact that we get to know each other for like an hour beforehand. But that was nice because he was able to reach, we obviously were more pharmacy focused in that podcast. So we talked a lot about, because I failed my NAPLEX and my law exam the first time around. And a lot of people don't like to admit that. And then, that's not going to pave the way of if you're successful or not, because obviously I just won an award in my district for my pharmacy this past year for, pharmacy customer care. So I think a lot of people kind of focus too much on the failures, and then that was a great way to just be able to reach students, because that's obviously I don't have a lot of exposure to students, right? I don't get to talk to them as much, but it was really fun to do, and I'm glad that I had this experience beforehand, because it kind of got me prepared without like the conversation was supposed to flow a little bit. I did say the word a lot, but I was happy with how it came out.
Yeah, and I thought it was a great podcast for you to be on, especially when you mentioned it. I was like, damn, you got on that? Like, I was like, holy shit, like that's so cool. And like I don't know, I just like I always keep an eye on everybody that, especially that do support me in kind of like more of my inner circle in terms of the podcast. And like when I saw you were doing that, I'm like, that's right up your alley. I'm like, you're probably living the fucking dream doing that shit, especially the fact that you talked about it. And I think that was just awesome. We are getting towards the end of the podcast, and I did want to at least bring that point up. Before we get into kind of like the wrap up, is there anything you wanted to say before? Because we're going to get to like the self-care and your monologue. But is there anything that you wanted to mention before we get to that?
No.
Okay, cool. So obviously with the way I do the original podcast is usually towards passions is that question, but that'd be redundant to ask people when they come back the same question. So what I do is obviously we have this episode titled self-care. So I kind of want to let you have the floor with like your wrap-up thoughts about self-care and maybe some advice around that. So I'll kind of let you go with that.
Damn, that's a kind of hard thing to lead into. But I guess with self-care in general, it's going to look different for everybody, and you really just need to take the time to learn for yourself, and it's not going to be perfect. I go in and out of burnout, and I do that to myself, and I need to know how to prevent that. But it doesn't mean it's not always going to happen. And like you said, it's kind of jumping back on the horse on like your routine or what works better for you, or maybe this didn't work out, so let's try something new here. And then I think another big thing is, even though it's self-care and it's about you and focusing on yourself, you also need to have the right people by your side. So people like your friends, if my friend didn't make me feel bad for missing her birthday, even though I felt bad. To just have those people that understand and support you and know that you're not doing it to be a jerk or you don't want to show up. It's because you need to take care of yourself. And that goes even with friends, family, and even a partner. My partner is one of the most amazing humans I've ever met, and she's very supportive, even on things that she may not understand. There's a lot of things that I deal with on just even a work basis or mental health issues that she's never had exposure to, but she's always willing to learn and be respectful, and just having the right people by your side. And I think I've grown a lot more patient and calm over the last year, and I want to say that's probably the people I surrounded myself with, changing gyms and having a coach. I'd probably say having a coach he's had such a huge impact on me, just with patience and calmness, because that's what he radiates and that's the vibe that he brings. And I feel like that's helped me in every aspect of my life. And then including my partner, where that day when I called her in the bathroom, I wanted to leave. But she just took a few minutes to talk to me, and she said, well, we'll figure it out. And that was probably the most comforting thing to hear, where someone says, we'll figure it out together. And I think that's the biggest key I want to say, just having the right people around you and taking that time to learn yourself.
I think it's a perfect way to wrap that up. And that's a tough one to lead into. I think you fucking nailed it on the head. So I think that was perfect. Claudia, I appreciate you coming back on this podcast. I love when people come back, because it in some way validates what I'm doing is positive and people enjoy it. So glad that you wanted to come back, and We'll definitely do it again.
Definitely.
Appreciate you. And for you guys, if you guys like the podcast, please rate, review, subscribe, share with your friends, share with your family, share with your grandma. You can check it out at thecarrollconnection.simplecast.com. Also available Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. If you'd like to watch your podcast, you can check it out on YouTube or search Carroll Connection, Jared Carroll, whatever. It should pop right up for you. And again, I'm going to add this caveat in there. If you want to be on the podcast, you could DM me, reach out to me, or if you are listening because of a guest and you don't know how to reach out to me, reach out to that guest, and then they can connect you with me because that's how a lot of people actually get on the podcast. So until next time, guys, peace.